An uncanny figure hiding in the darkness of a narrow back alley wriggled about. What the? Hello, welcome back to Iwaihime. Let us start with Tsubakiko's side of this story now. Of this final part of the story.
そなたの無念と進も我が鹿と引き受けようぞ。小賢しき人鬼どもの五つ子の邪法によって分けられたすすだが、再び一つに戻ることを誰も食い止められはせぬ。六神彦の御事の呪いは一つに戻る。そして兄上様のご無念を慰めるに足る大災厄となりて、人鬼どもを必ずや滅ぼすのだ。
すずむ、もうすぐご飯できるから、それくらいにしてシャワー浴びてきたら？
And I don't get to pick her now because she's just the last one. It didn't seem Suzume would hurt her. His heart and soul were devoted solely to his training. Tsubakiko called out to him again, but his focus remained unbroken. I felt like something was coming into view. The divine curse had resided in both of them, feeding off their mental trauma. Twice had my fist reached them. Perhaps the second time was also a fluke, but it had reached nonetheless. At first I only felt it with my fingers, but this time I felt it with my palm, a resistance of sorts. Perhaps this was arrogant, but I felt I needed to say it. Step by step, I was slowly but surely approaching the essence of the divine tribute style. I had already felt it with my hand. I just had to grasp it. Grasp it, clench my hand to his, and dedicate it.
Sit! あれ、キコちゃん。
You just notice her?
食べる？ご飯。温め直すよ。
Oh.
話しかけても全然聞こえてないんだもん。すっごい集中力だったね。
うん。もう少しつかめそうなんだ。
つかめるとどうなるの？
みんなを助けられると思う。
みんなって？
You? The faces of those in the LCSC suffering from hauntings flashed through my head. But they weren't the only ones. The divine curse had lasted 1,000 years. Simply saving a few of his descendants wouldn't cut it, I could tell. So all I could say was this.
みんなだよ。みんな、僕が助けたい。
All the people who suffered from the machinations of the divine curse. The shrine's visitors went to pray not at the main hall, but the worship hall built in front of it. Any unfamiliar with the shrine assumed that it was the main hall. The Shintai for the god deified in this shrine was stored in the main hall, however not the worship hall. As such, it was regarded as sacred, and not even the chief priest could enter without permission. There were some shrines where not even the head priests ever beheld their shrines in Shintai. Iwaihime Shrine Main Hall was only open a few days a year for cleaning, but the general public wasn't allowed inside, just the chief priest of the Kurakamis and the representatives of the parishioners. Thus, it was a very sacred and majestic place for Toei. Alright, we go back to Toei for a bit. A bulky temple bell hung from a thick rope. The room was decorated reverently, signifying this bell was unmistakably this shrine's Shintai. But the bell was neither fancy nor all that special. It was a cursed bell carved faintly in soot that no amount of polish could ever remove. The cursed millennium began the moment that Suzanome was sealed inside it, and the suit gathered ritual was conducted. Since the bell was hanging off the ground, one could crawl into it if they wanted. Toei had tried to do just that, so Chata was scolded harshly. She was told the area under the bell was very sacred and thus off limits. Toei had come to the dimly lit main hall all by herself. She kneeled in front of the bell. After that, she quietly opened her mother's letter. Read this only when you can no longer bear the stones in your stomach. The agony in her stomach was nigh unbearable by now, meaning the time had come. The foreword contained information her mother and grandmother had passed down. Both of them had discerned that the seal on the cursed suit would break someday, but they couldn't just let that come to pass. To seal the suit away forever and to keep this land safe, that was a duty passed down to the daughters of the Kurakami family, generation after generation. It seemed her grandmother had been seriously considering how to prepare for that day. The seal had almost broken several hundred years ago, but the crisis was averted when they divided up the suit with the quintuplet spell. And that was the only way the Kurakamis had of extending it. But the tome with the spell had been lost to a fire. Thus, there was an urgent need to find an alternate to the spell. As a result, they had discovered one last viable resort. That final resort was written in the letter. First of all, the seal could not last forever, that was a fact, but it was mere wishful thinking that diluting the suit at just the right time would prevent a full-blown calamity. In the end, the daughters of the Kurakamis would not be rewarded for keeping the curse sealed for 1,000 years. Despite that, however, there was one last resort that could weaken the calamity at least a little. Her grandmother once considered using it to end her own cursed life. She couldn't bear the thought of having a child doomed to suffer from the same agony as her, but in the end she couldn't help but believe in the unfulfilled dream she, her ancestors, and her descendants had all clung to until the bitter end, and that the curse would somehow end, and Rokuga Mehiko no Mikoto's wrath would be quelled. Otherwise, there would be no reward for the 1,000 years of suffering. Which was why this last resort was only for when all hope of that miracle seemed lost. We had to delay the curse for as long as possible once the current sacrifice had made peace with their fate. Someone who had never borne that burden might have given up at the realization that the calamity was inevitable. But the sacrifices of the Kurakami family were familiar with suffering. All they wished for was that it would be worth something. Until it was no different.
ありがとうございます。母上。トエは母上の、そしてご先祖様代々の苦労を決してないがしろにすることはありません。
Toei made that vow and looked up at the dimly lit bell. It shone there in the solemn silence.
それにしても陸奥の末裔め、一度ならず二度も我らを返り討ちにするとは。
And he's gonna do it a third time.
そなたはどうする？我らのすすすべてを集めれば十分な災厄となろう。あれのすすはあればよいが、たやすくは手に入るまい。それでもあれの生きぎも欲するのか。そなたの手で自ら災厄を下したいと願うか。
無論にございます。兄上様のご無念を晴らすことこそ我らの悲願。五つ子の邪法にて別れた身とはいえ、その志は姉上様に勝るとも劣りません。
She slowly stood up. Her gaze was fearless, her eyes shining scarlet. Oh, because she's the last one, I guess I don't even... Oh, no. Nope, I still get to click on her. Okay. Tsubakiko. Happened long ago when I was still a kid in kindergarten. Just like every other girl might look or might have a proper lady, for me, playing house was a perfect recital of when I'd someday be a housewife too. I tried acting even cuter than normal when I was in front of the boys. I'd even get in trouble for playing with mom's makeup and cookware sometimes. I didn't mean any harm, of course. because I was that serious about my dream even back then. To become the perfect wife. Aww.
はいはい、先生はお父さんの役ね。ただいま。
Aww.
あなた、おかえりなさい。お風呂にする？ご飯にする？じゃあお風呂からにしようかな。お風呂沸いてますよ。背中流してあげるね。あら嬉しい。先生もTsubakikoちゃんみたいなお嫁さん欲しいな。
Even when Tanabata came around, my wish was the same. I want to be the perfect wife. But I was a kid. I never thought about it much deeper than that. I wanted to be a wife, but I never even considered that I'd need to marry someone to make that happen. Pretty stupid, huh? That's like the first thing you're supposed to think of.
お嫁さんになりたかったら男の子と喧嘩しちゃダメだぞ。
でもマー君、Tsubakikoのスカートめくったんだよ。
それにしても女の子がドロップキックをかますのはな。
I barely remembered it, but apparently I kicked a boy so hard he smashed his head into the edge of a locker, sending him to the hospital. Personally, I thought it was a suitable price to pay for trying to steal a glance at my panties. I wanted to be a wife, and yet I considered I'd constantly be picking fights with boys back in kindergarten.
だからあなた、乱暴な漫画はTsubakikoの手の届くところに置かないでって言ったでしょ。いいTsubakiko、お父さんの漫画は真似しちゃいけない乱暴な漫画なのよ。素敵なお嫁さんになりたかったら優しい女の子にならなくちゃ。乱暴はダメよ。
パパにもドロップキックとか円髄蹴りとかシャイニングウィザードとかもうやっちゃダメだぞ。第一な、お嫁さんというのは男の子に嫌われたらなれないんだぞ。
Those words were such a shock to me. I never realized you needed a boy's approval before you could be a wife.
これからはもう少し女の子らしくしなくっちゃね。
男の子とも仲良くしなさい。そうしたらきっと素敵なお嫁さんになれるぞ。
本当？じゃあ私これからはもう喧嘩しない。優しい女の子になる。グッドモーニングモーニング。朝だよ。
Tsubakiko opened the curtains with a whoosh. The sun's warm rays bathed the room in the light.
ほら進む。いつまで寝てるの？お寝坊さ
ん。何事？
朝なの、朝。男子ってこういうシチュエーション大好きなんでしょ？もっと喜んでくれてもいいのに。
Most people would see this as a standard girl next door romantic comedy act, and wish the two of them dead in an envious rage. But Suzumu was normally quite the early bird. In contrast, Tsubakiko was a real night owl. Even when she went to bed, she spent 30 minutes screaming about playing One Your Daughter, not wanting to waste her MP. One Your Daughter was a free-to-play mobile puzzle game constantly being pushed and commercials and ads all over. As such, it had taken her a few days before she could adjust and waking up Suzumu each morning, like his future wife might.
ずいぶん久しぶりだね。キコちゃんに起こしてもらうのは。起こしてくれてありがとう。
それでね、すずむ、朝ごはん作ってみたんだけど。
それは嬉しいな。でも珍しいね。どうしたの？急に。
Last night, she had a dream that brought back all sorts of memories to her innocent kindergarten days when she swung to become a perfect wife. Memories so pure and exciting that before she knew it, she'd woken up at the crack of dawn. Thus, she made a spur-of-the-moment decision to make breakfast for Suzumu. Despite that, he was as composed as ever. Though a girl his age had used her spirit key to sneak into his room, he wasn't the least bit shaken. Tsubakiko brought the food from her own apartment on a tray. The hallway was rich with the scent of cooking she must have cooked in her room. She struggled to make her way through the door while her hands were occupied with carrying the tray.
無理に運ばないで、 キコちゃんの部屋で食べてもいいのに。
乙女の部屋は男子は立ち入り禁止なの。
僕の部屋には勝手に入ってくるのに。
いいでしょ、私たち親戚同士なんだから。
なんかおかしい気がするけど、気のせいかな。
気のせい気のせい。さ、召し上がれ。
White rice, miso soup, seasoned seaweed, stir-fried spinach, bacon, and eggs. The kind of breakfast you'd see in any average household.
ご飯おいしいね。
他には？
お味噌汁もおいしいよ。キコちゃんはお料理上手だね。
他には？
ほうれん草もおいしいよ。僕好きなんだ。
他には？
ベーコンエッグも念入りに火が通ってて美味しいと思うよ。
ちゃんと火通さないと危ないからね。特に気をつけたの。
美味しいよ。こんなにバリッとおせんべいみたいに食べられるベーコンエッグなんて初めてかな。
そう？今流行りの焼き方なの知らないの？遅れてる。
Tsubakiko made hasty excuses with a blush. Suzumu chuckled at the sight. Anyone could tell from a glance that she'd overcooked the bacon and eggs a little, not scratched at a lot. In actuality, Tsubakiko had borrowed the rice, miso soup, and spinach from her mother. In other words, all she actually cooked were the bacon and eggs. Her room currently reeked of smoke. She'd actually wanted to make more than that. But the disaster with the bacon and eggs had shattered her spirit.
お嫁さんって大変だね。
どうして？
毎日旦那様より早起きして朝ごはん作るんでしょ？こんな朝ごはん一つ作るだけで青息と息なんて全然だよね。
でもキコちゃんはこうして作ってくれたよ。僕はとっても嬉しいし、きっと未来の旦那さんも喜んでくれると思うな。
スズムは嬉しい？
嬉しいよ。
こんな情けないベーコンエッグを作るお嫁さんでも？
僕のためを思って作ってくれたものならすごく嬉しいよ。そんな朝ごはんを毎日食べられたら毎日仕事を頑張れると思うよ。だからキコちゃんの未来のお婿さんはきっと幸せだと思うよ。
Of course, I had to phrase it like that. His words warmed Tsubakiko's heart. If her married life were anything like this, she felt she could take on the whole world. If Suzumu were her husband, she believed she could do anything. Thus she swore to keep up her training so she could someday be the perfect housewife.
花嫁修行に付き合ってくれてありがとう。素敵なお嫁さんになりたいから。
僕でよければいつでも協力するよ。
ありがとうサンキューだよ。
Tsubakiko was bursting with joy. And so the two of them ate their crispy bacon and eggs like your average newlywed couple. That was definitely crispy. I almost always rode my bike to school, but when Suzumu and I were both riding our bikes, it felt like we were taking a nice romantic trip together. The early bird gets warm, so to say, and that's precisely how I felt. I was in such a good mood today. I felt like I was one step closer to becoming the perfect wife. I was on top of the world. Everything was going so well. So why did it all have to go south?
まだ祭るか？あ？血祭り足りねえか？
I remember this side of her. Grippy delinquents laid sprawled out on the ground before springing up and groveling on their knees.
させ血まみれ天女のバキコさんとは知らず。
次にススコーにちょっかい出したら祭る。問答無用で血祭る。
失礼しました。
子ちゃんって強いね。
そりゃあそうだぜ。何しろ昔は。
Normally I'd slug Atsuta right now and got to give a yapping about my past. But I won't be fooling anyone after that horrendous display just now. Okay, I should probably back up and give some context here. Suzumu and I met up with Atsuta at the Iwaihime shopping district this morning. After that, we saw some idiot trying to bully one of the guys from our school. But after I politely asked them to cut it out, they said some choice words that would invoke any lady's wrath. I couldn't remember a thing after that. Next thing I knew, I was here. And with that, my dream went up in flames. And Suzumu knew of my dark and sordid past. Things were really awkward between us that day. More accurately, I just didn't know how to approach him after that. So I simply kept avoiding when they returned, though I knew I couldn't keep it up forever. However patient Suzumu might be, even he had his limits. So when school ended for the day, he grabbed me by my arm.
Kiko-chan, 朝のこと、まだ気にしてるの?
Of course, you were the last guy I wanted knowing my secret. Yeah, right. Like he'd ever believe me saying something that ladylike at this point. Why me?
まあ、今さら可愛こぶったってもう手遅れだしね。とほほとほほだよ。
でもかっこよかったよ。同じ学校の人が難儀してるのをみんな見て見ぬふりをして通り過ぎてたのに、キコちゃんは勇敢に声をかけたんだもの。それに助けた彼はキコちゃんの知り合いだったわけでもないんでしょ。だからなおさらキコちゃんはかっこよかったよ。
You're such a good guy.
そう？
うん。あんな剣幕で怒鳴ってる不良を前にキコちゃんはすっごく冷静だったし。
It was more like I lost my shit and gave in to Satsu no Hado though. But apparently it looked like I was totally in control from behind. Anyway, I was glad he was proud of me for standing up for that guy, but that didn't excuse the slaughter that followed.
僕はそれを含めてもかっこよかったと思うよ。普段はおしとやかでも言うべき時、やるべき時はやるって女性好きだから。
好き？
うん。
I never would have expected to find Suzumu's type like this. Did I just trip a romance fly without even trying to? Was I seriously that lucky?
むしろ情けないのは僕だよ。ああいう時は男の僕が率先して出るべきだったのに、ついぼんやりしてしまって。僕がしっかりしていればキコちゃんが体を張る必要もなかったし、何よりそうして一日気にすることもなかっただろうし、それを申し訳ないと思ったこととかっこよかったよってこと、どうしても伝えたかったんだ。
私のこと幻滅してない？
しないよ。それどころかもっとキコちゃんのこと好きになったよ。
本当？
うん。強い女性って素敵だよね。
本当に？私をおだてるために適当なことを言ってんじゃないの？
そんなわけないよ。それに僕がキコちゃんに幻滅なんてしてたら一緒に帰ろうなんて誘うと思う
？Suzumu flashed me a serene smile, reversing any suspicion I may have had of him being insincere. Then, I was the only one who'd been worked up about the whole thing. Suzumu hadn't been let down a bit. Said I gained some serious points with him in a way I hadn't expected. It was like I'd risen from hell to heaven. But I knew I shouldn't put the cart before the horse like that. It was a bad habit of mine. We stopped by a fast food joint on our way home where I told them any sort of tales of my edgier years. I expected him to be horrified for sure, but instead he listened with a gleam in his eyes.
かっこいいな。仲間を守るために戦うなんて本当にすごいや。僕も人のために戦えるようにもっともっと精進しなきゃ。
あははははは。でもいくらなんでもさすがにドン引きでしょう。今でこそこんな可愛い子アピールしてるけど、かつてはとんでもなかったし。
かつてはかつてだよ。今がそうなわけじゃない。それにキコちゃんの武勇伝はどれも相応の理由があっての喧嘩ばかりだったと思うよ。弱い者いじめとか何の意味もなく暴力を振るってたとか、そういうのは一つもなかったと思うよ。
Well, yeah, I was the head of the Bloodstained Angels attack unit. I would never stoop so low. We were vigilantes. We never laid a hand on the innocent. Instead, we were the kind who went around dishing out punishment to hot-headed scumbags who did sink to those levels.
ね。別にキコちゃんは恥ずかしいことをしてたわけじゃないと思うよ。
まあ、お天道様に胸張って言えることじゃないよね。
今はもう卒業したんだし、もう気にしなくてもいいんじゃないかな。人間誰にだって反抗期みたいなものはあるし、僕だって親に反抗して悪いことしたことあるしさ。
スズムが？悪いことってどんな？
誰にも内緒だよ。
内緒にする。私とスズムだけの秘密。
Suzumu whispered in my ear.
本当に？スズムが？
Are we not gonna know?
だから内緒だって声が大きいよ。ね。それに比べたらキコちゃんのやんちゃ時代だって特別なことじゃないよ。
And we the players don't get to naturally know, apparently. I couldn't help but laugh at what a big deal I'm making of all this. Literally roared with laughter, and before long Suzumu joined in. I didn't worry so much about this whole thing, but telling it all to him took such a load off my chest. I felt like I could even run into my room with no further reservations. We continued chatting the dying sunlight as we walked our bikes home. In hindsight, Suzumu was probably being considerate of me in his little way. In the end, his smile laid my heart bare. But he had all confessed his own shameful past, so we weren't even therefore. I had no reason to be embarrassed anymore. It was like, I don't know, like we'd already crossed some sort of emotional threshold. Now that I had nothing to hide from Suzumu, I felt I could show him the real me and its truest meaning. A girl would have to be crazy to let a guy like him out of her grasp. So I had to take him for my own. I wouldn't let anyone else have him, never. I had nothing left to fear. I could confess to him right in the spot. That way, nobody else could ever lay a finger on him.
ねえ、スズム。
何？
The two of us stopped. The shopping district was bustling with activity, yet it felt like we were all alone in the world.
茶化すのはなしで聞いてほしいんだけど。
I faltered at the serious look he was giving me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't lose heart. I needed to be brave. Oh no, I couldn't do this. I couldn't look him in the eye. It'd be like staring at the sun. Thus I shifted my gaze far behind him. What? I could hear children laughing and playing. But I felt I could hear my younger self's voice among them.
ツバキコはね、素敵なお嫁さんになるの。
Oh boy. Well, isn't that sweet? That's a lovely little dream. You can do it, Tsubakiko. I know you can. Everyone was cheering me on with a big smile. I wasn't simply telling people about my dream. I also knew those magic words that put smiles on people's faces. I'm going to be the perfect wife when I grow up. Adults would smile and rustle my hair affectionately whenever I uttered that spell. It made me so happy. May all your days be filled with smiles.
どうしたの？キコちゃん。
Kiko had tried to tell me something, but then she saw something behind her fuzz up like a deer in headlights. Turned around, but all I saw were the evening crowds of the Iwaihime shopping district. Nothing more, nothing less. Uh-oh.
どうしたの？しっかり。
Uh-oh. Kiko gripped her head and moaned. Her eyes were dazed and she was staggering. Could this be one of those hauntings Miss Hinagata told me about? She said they wouldn't happen while I was around, but perhaps there were exceptions. At any rate, I couldn't leave Kiko out in the middle of the street. Parked our bikes at the side of the road and grabbed her by the shoulder.
Kiko-chan, 大丈夫？僕がわかる？
She rolled as if in the midst of a nightmare. Her face was pale and clammy with sweat, while her eyes were wide and unfocused. A nightmare that struck in broad daylight. This has to be haunting. Whatever the case, I had to get her home and let her rest. Then I'd call Miss Hinagata and ask what to do next. I draped my arm around Kiko's shoulder to hurry on home. I got a bad feeling and turned around. I felt as though something sickening was nearby. But there was nothing that fit the description in the crowd. After Suzumu Tsubakiko left the shopping district, an uncanny figure, hiding in the darkness of a narrow back alley, wriggled about. What the fuck is that? It was disgustingly obese and gave off a rank odor like sweat in a rancid sewer. Oh my god. It had small, childlike eyes that gleamed ominously. The man's breathing was loud and heavy. Either his nose was stuffed or he did it on purpose. Greasy sweat trickled down the tip of his nose with each fetid and foul exhalation.
やっと見つけたよ。Tsubakikoちゃん、美人になったね。知ってたし。
Man smiled and giggled to himself as if remembering something amusing.
すぐに迎えに行くからね。そしたら今度こそ僕のお嫁さんにしてあげるからね。
Put Kiko into bed and called Miss Hinagata immediately afterwards. Kiko wasn't suffering anymore, but she was dead tired.
それは間違いなく霊障ね。
どうすればいいんですか？
彼女を安全な場所に運んで横にする。で、正解よ。100点満点ね。半分眠った意識で何か危険なことをすることもあるから、意識が戻るまでそばにいてあげてね。
危険なことって？
時に霊が自傷行為をそそのかすこともあるからね。身の回りに刃物がないかだけ確認してちょうだい。
刃物はないですけど、危険物はだいぶ。
Yeah. Trophies of Kiko's younger days, such as spiked bats and wooden swords, are aplenty here. It could be trouble should worse come to worse, so I gathered them up, brought them on towel, and hid them away.
それにしても、鈴原くんと一緒なのに霊障にやられるなんて珍しいこともあるわね。
僕に宿る覇者の力よりも強い霊に襲われたとか。
鈴原くんの持つ力はかなりのものよ。それを上回る霊なんてなかなかいないと思うわ。春宮さんが具合を悪くした時の状況がちょっとわからないけれど、ひょっとしたら霊障じゃなくて貧血とか他の理由によるものもあるかもしれないわね。
でも霊障の可能性がゼロってわけじゃないですよね。
まあね、誰にもゼロなんて断言はできないわ。
彼女を霊障から救うにはどうすればいいんですか？
霊障は基本的に白昼夢。寝ぼけて身に危険が及ばない場所ならば放っておいても大丈夫よ。そのうち目が覚める。そしたらもうケロッとしているわ。
The situation was more dire, but Miss Hinagata made it sound like business as usual. Because huntings were a regular occurrence for them. That's why she was telling me all I had to do was stay with her until she woke up.
心配してくれてありがとうね。私たちにとってはよくあることよ。
そうですか。僕の力が弱まってるということなのかな。
そうなの？最近お稽古を少しサボってるとか？
いえ、そんなことはないですけど、僕と一緒なのにキコちゃんを守ることができなかった。それは僕の精進が不足してたからなのかなって思って。
ならもっともっとお稽古に勤しんでもらわないとね。鈴原くんはシャチホコ部の最終兵器なんだから。
Aside with Louis, things weren't as bad as they seemed. Miss Hinagata hung up after telling me to call her if anything happened. I went to go check up on Kiko only to find her wide awake. She must have woken up while I was on the phone.
どう？大丈夫？
She sat up sluggishly and heaved a deep sigh. I wondered what kind of nightmare she had. Frustration feeling and her time and need ate away at me.
キコちゃんは霊障にやられてたんだよ。
霊障。
Oh right, Miss Hinagata was the only one who really knew about them. She said the girls at the LCSC were only perceived them as bad dreams.
きっと立ちくらみか何かだよ。体調も悪かったんだね。うなされてたんだよ。
うなされてた。
うん。きっと悪い夢を見てたんだよ。でももう大丈夫だよ。安心して。
If Miss Hinagata was correct, then Kiko was fine by this point. After all, nightmares are vivid right after you have one, but fade from memory in no time.
ごめんね。スズムが介抱してくれたんだね。
こっちこそごめんね。部屋にまで入っちゃって。
The color returned to Kiko's face, rapidly growing red as a beet.
なんでスズムが私の部屋に鍵はどうして？
キコちゃんの具合が悪いみたいですっておばさんに話したら鍵を。
ババア！血祭られてーか
ー元気が出てよかった。キコちゃんの武勇伝はもう聞かせてもらってるからね。部屋に驚いたりしないよ。
いずれは見せる気でいたけど、心の準備がまだなのに。まだなのに。母さんひどいよ。
I could have handled that better. I needed to work on my lack of tact.
じゃあ僕庭で稽古してるから。
稽古？私をほったらかして。
え？
謝れ！土下座しろ！乙女の聖域、勝手に踏み込んでごめんなさいって言え！お母さんのバカ！
Kiko was so worked up she wasn't even making sense anymore. But at least it seemed the haunting had subsided. I apologized as I left her room.
稽古もっと頑張らなきゃ。
The more I devoted myself to my training, the stronger my power would grow, I was sure of it. I had to work harder so that Kiko wouldn't suffer from another haunting. Tsubakiko's breathing grew labored again. The sweat rose to her forehead once more. She stood abruptly, rushing over to the door, locked it, and put up the chain. She then ran back into the room and violently shut the curtains. Tsubakiko used so much strength that she tore off one of the latches on the curtain rail. With a sound it made her faint, it scared the living daylights out of her. Tsubakiko clung to the curtains as she nervously gazed outside through the gap between them. All she saw was the same scenery as always, but that wasn't enough to convince her. The room was pitch dark without sunlight. Tsubakiko threw a blanket overhead and huddled in the corner of the room without leaving the lights off. Terror and anxiety danced across her eyes. She couldn't calm down at all. Just then she heard a frightful sound. It felt as though she was growing louder by the second. Footsteps, perhaps? It was getting closer and closer. Tsubakiko held her breath hard enough to choke herself as she crawled over to the gap in the curtains. She peeked through and discovered it was the sound of Suzumu punching that tree. He was in his dojo uniform, training more intensely than usual. It wasn't footsteps. Tsubakiko heaved a sigh of relief as she flopped down to the floor, but her face showed no sign of ease at the moment. She was a nervous wreck, frightened by the slightest sounds peeking through the window or the door's peephole over and over again. She took her phone off her desk with trembling hands. After checking what year it was, she started counting something down with her fingers. When she finished, she fell backwards as though she fainted. She was lucky her bed was right there. Had she been even saw that, she could have smashed her head on the edge of the bed. That was how hard her fall back had been. She lay there frozen for so long, she started entertaining the idea that she was in fact a puppet. No matter how many waves of terror assaulted her, her brain couldn't tell what it thought was scary. And so she mainly continued to tremble and fear without knowing the source of her fright. Oh no. Oh no.
Tsubakiko chan no ouchi. Mitsuketa.
And on that lovely note, we'll end this video for Iwaihime here. Oh, at least I know what's gonna go at the front of the video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, then subscribe, check out other videos I've done, and see you next time. Bye bye.